Meantime, let's turn our attention back to Secretary Geithner's trip to Europe and to the Middle East, his first as head of the Treasury. So what does he need to accomplish in this trip? We're going to turn for some answers to institutional investors' #1 ranked analyst on Washington Research for about 6 straight years now, Tom Gallagher, head of policy research of International Strategy and Investment Group. He comes to us live from Washington. Tom, I'm so glad to have you on the show, having followed you for years from your Rukeyser days. But today, topic #1 with Geithner is the question of will investors abroad continuing to buy U.S. Treasuries? But on this topic, it's seemingly all about China. So why is the Middle East in the headlines all this week?
Well, first, thanks for having me on, Margaret. But I think, as Peter Cook said earlier in your program, they still are a major investor. Remember, Geithner has already been to China, and so he's raised the issue with them there. And he has lots of other issues that he has to take up both in Europe and in the Middle East. They got some routine issues. They're always developing their G20 agenda. The financing of terrorism is another agenda item. But I think he's really trying to reassure foreign investors, especially state investors in the Middle East, that the U.S. is a place where you can continue to invest your money safely.
So this is seemingly more about the headline. You don't expect any real change in policy announcements?
Oh, I'd be surprised if there was anything along those lines coming out of this trip. Secretaries of Treasury have routine international trips, and I think he's just kind of dealing with the number of issues that have accumulated on this. But again, it really is about reassuring foreign investors. Investors in the Middle East, like China, have continued to finance the U.S. Budget deficit, but there's also a security element, a foreign policy element to our relationship with the Middle East that doesn't really exist in China. So it's a little bit unique, a little different from the Chinese issue in that respect.
Well, here at home, and certainly one topic that has been impacting the market is the controversy over lender CIT and just what is going to happen with the FDIC, whether or not they are going to go ahead and backstop debt. Of course, the taxpayer has already given a capital infusion to CIT. What is your thought here in terms of whether the FDIC is going to step up to the plate and backstop the debt, and whether there still is this question of moral hazard flowing out there if they do so?
Well, I think there genuinely is that question of moral hazard, Margaret, as you say, and there's also the perception that, unlike the financial institutions that got support last year, that CIT it doesn't have that systemic importance. That is, if they go under, you get ripple effects out throughout the financial system. So I think that leads the government to want to be more limited in anything they do for CIT. I think the FDIC is also worried about the potential for losses if they make any loans to CIT. So I think the attention has really shifted away from the FDIC for now. Maybe there's some other things that the government might do, but I think for now their inclination is to keep whatever they do on a more limited basis.
And Treasury Secretary Geithner telling Peter Cook, as you heard, that the government has the authority and the ability to address the problem, but really remaining kind of vague as to what addressing that problem would entail. I mean, what can be done at this point?
As you say, the major thing they're focused on is the access to the FDIC's temporary liquidity guarantee program. There's been some talk that maybe the FDIC wanted to see if CIT could raise some equity before they give them access to that program. So they appear to be backing away from that. There are other ways that the government can help out a bank in a smaller scale. But I think there's also the sense here that if CIT goes away, a lot of that business could go to other banks. So, given that you've had a number of entities that have been bailed out, I think that for both economic and even political reasons, they would probably like to have some place where they wouldn't have a major degree of government involvement in a financial institution that's in trouble.
All right, Tom, well, stick with us because there's a lot of news coming out of Washington today and in the week to come. So we're going to have more with you. This is Tom Gallagher, head of policy research at International Strategy and Investment Group. We're focusing on that week ahead. When we come back from this break, we're going to look at just what the impact on business might be. Stick with us. Welcome back to Bloomberg. With us now is Tom Gallagher. He's head of policy research of ISI Group in Washington. Tom, thanks for sticking with us. I do want to ask you, because we have had some headlines passing through the terminal in the past hour, particularly in regard to the nominee for Surgeon General by President Obama, Regina Benjamin. Any impact there on the health care agenda? Does that signal anything to you?
To be honest, I don't know anything about her. I doubt that it has any impact. The healthcare reform debate is well out of the station, so I don't think any appointments now are really going to have a major influence on the debate.
Now, where do we stand, though, in terms of that healthcare agenda? You had been saying that there has been sort of a velocity shift, a momentum shift into looking at climate change, at healthcare and financial regulation in Washington right now. Where do we stand? What's actually going to get done this summer?
Right. I think the political energy in Washington really has shifted from the macro financial crisis agenda to the sector agenda, and you listed the three sectors there: healthcare, climate change, and financial re-regulation. On healthcare, there had been initially an expectation or a hope that the House would pass a bill by the August recess, and that the Senate committees could report out bills by then. They're probably not going to make that. I don't think that signals a huge problem for the legislation because you still have plenty of time to try to work it out. I thought over the weekend there was an important development. The House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Rangel outlined the elements of his bill, both in terms of the size and then how it's going to be paid for. I think the pay-fors, especially the income tax surtax at the high end, is going to be a difficult sell in the Senate. But nonetheless, I think the parameters of the House bill, which will more or less define the left end of the range of possible outcomes, are becoming a little bit clearer.
Okay. And lastly, before we go, do you want to ask you, Sonia Sotomayor, her hearing happening right now as we speak, how likely will she be, is she to be confirmed? And is there any impact on business there?
Well, I think it's pretty obvious that she's going to have a relatively easy confirmation process. We'll see how the hearings go, if that changes it. But right now, the expectation is that it'll be relatively easy. And I think it's very hard at the confirmation stage to predict any really significant investment implications from a single Supreme Court nominee.
All right. Thank you.
I don't really expect anything significant.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom Gallagher, Head of Policy Research at ISI Group.